All right, so let's get started. So we're just going through 2010 overview now today. So we know how it goes after this. So SharePoint. So before I actually put it together, I want to know what you actually think of SharePoint and what you think it is doing in the market.
With what idea I have about SharePoint is like it's a document management system, it's a content management system. Basically, it allows you to share documents, and then it has features like say meeting organizer and all this stuff, and it has lots to do with security of those documents and whom to give access to and whatnot. And again, content management system allows you to create, I'm sure, of some in-house websites or websites which expose to the outside world with ease.
Right. So you got it pretty much there. So from an end user perspective and from an IT pro perspective. So this is how SharePoint evaluated. So it has been it was there since 2001, which was a pretty basic version of SharePoint, and then it's just like on top of .NET framework. SharePoint is always on .NET framework. So without .NET, there is no SharePoint. But people have a misconception that if you have to be a SharePoint pro, you need to know .NET. But I would say not needed, because I trained many guys who doesn't know any programming basics even, and trained in SharePoint directly, and yeah, they did exercise my assignments.
Okay.
So right, so it started with 2010, and they have created so far 2003 and 2007, and so they kept adding the features on top of the actual 2001 version, and they called it Windows SharePoint Services in 2003, which was actually a product I would call. If you compare with 2001, it wasn't even a product. I mean, it wasn't even stable, and it didn't even grab the market. It's very much basic functionality that they gave it, through. So you go to a website. So it's not like a .NET website. So .NET website, if you have to create, you have to go you have to create IIS website. You have to create all those folder structures.
Right.
You have to deploy all your components, controls. You have to code to see even a single page, everything, right?
Yes.
So whereas in SharePoint, you don't have to do that. It's all one click away. So you just click on it, the site is right there. You just have to customize and then just add or configure. You don't have to code it, in fact. So that's what SharePoint does it. The main objective of it is, to minimize the code. But of course, we do code a lot in SharePoint for various client specs.
Okay.
So then 2003 came in. That was pretty much stable. That got a good market, reasonable market. At least SharePoint. I mean, people know that there is a product from Microsoft, which is SharePoint, doing some cool thing there. And then 2003. After then 2007 came in, and it's again the same version, but they added a lot of integration features like search. I mean, it's not just only a one-click away site creation wizard. It's not only that. I mean, so they want the emphasis on more on the product than just saying it's just like a site creation wizard. It's not that, but it also does a lot of things. So they emphasize on search capabilities, findability and all that features in 2007.
Okay.
And of course, every version of the product kept adding, otherwise they can't sell it for sure. So I guess talks very specific to 2010 instead of talking in detail into each version of SharePoint. The old versions. So we got 2010 versions into two different licenses, Foundation and Server. Foundation was free, so you can just grab it and install it if you have the system that is fit for the product. So you can just install it and play around with it. And you can even code or whatever to deploy your own custom components. But what what is missed in Foundation, I mean what you will achieve or get it from server, is some of the enterprise features like search, and I wouldn't say just search. Search has different features within it. That won't be there in Foundation, but will be there in server.
Oh, okay.
And pretty much we do have some kind of insight features, Excel services, and performance point and all that. So they made it as a different license and added into the enterprise server license.
Mm-hmm.
So the SharePoint features completely, we can just put it into different categories, like this particular wheel shows. The features can be shown into the sites category, communities, content, search, insights, and composites.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about each category. So when we say sites,
Mm-hmm.
so that's pretty much SharePoint is famous for. Like, so I want to set up a site. So I want, my organization have a department, they want to set up a site. So what we're going to do in .NET is like I already explained, we start it as a project itself. Like,
yes.
Okay, we have to create an IIS website, set up all the permissions, set up all those pools accounts, and then whatnot, database. Oh my God, that was really hard. Horrible that in the IIS.
Mm-hmm.
But in SharePoint, it's when you set up the SharePoint, it's already in there, so it's already configured. So you just have to go to the central admin and just say, choose the site template. So there are already predefined site templates like project, team site, publishing portal. You just need to choose the template and then name the site with your department name. That's it. The site is right there. Now it's ready to have the content and use it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty much integrated with Office product because it's again by Microsoft. So they integrated all those Office applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Visio, and all that. They are pretty much tightly integrated with SharePoint. So you move here and there, you still have the data in metadata tagged and in place. So that's the sites category. It's much about the wizard for site creation.
Okay.
With less development. In fact, with no development.
Mm-hmm.
So sites. So when you set up a site, you use all the list libraries where you can add the. So when I say list is something not like a document library, but just. If you compare the SQL table, I would say list is pretty similar. So, like you have the table, rows, columns. So list is pretty simple. You just add the entries and all those values in there. And you define the column, which type of column it is, and all that.
Okay.
And whereas a document library, it's the one that will hold all your documents. Like you were explaining the document management system. This is what it is. It does take tons of I wouldn't say ton, it got its limitations, but it takes all those documents, various types of documents, and then you have a versioning enabled on these libraries. So basically, if I just compare this with the legacy systems or the old-fashioned way of doing things, like the company sends an email with a report basically from one department to other department, saying this is what it is, what the report is for this quarter, and forward it to whoever need it. Then they keep forwarding it, and then someone replies to it saying this is not the correct one, I added some more data, and then they reply that. So there are a lot of versions for this document and a lot of files created out of it, right? And it's all scattered. So SharePoint provides a centralized document management system. You can put in one file there, and people keep editing, adding whatever they want to do on one single instance of the file. So and it's not just that, but it does have the versioning, so people know what changes have been made, and if they want to revert back to the previous version, they can always go back. And it's a lock-in mechanism because it has a versioning enable, check in, check out. So that's part of the sites category, and so that was there until 2003, I can say. And then communities, so they want to give a much much capability to the enterprise, not just the mid-range companies. It's like every department, they will keep creating their own sites, and if they want to, so sites actually do collaboration as well, and as well as the document management. But what about if they have a lot of fun groups or community groups that is not actually defined as a department, but more of a fun kind, more of a blogging stuff. So they want to have that features part of the SharePoint product. So that is when they started creating some community-based site templates. It's not just a site template. I mean, of course, it's a site template, but it's quite different from other templates because of the features or the functionality that has been added in these templates. Like, so you can create a community site which will internally have a blog site itself. So you can have your own blog site where, it's pretty much the, if you look at any of the internet blog service providers, like WordPress or Google Blog or whatever, it's pretty similar features. But in SharePoint way, like you can just create your blog post and then people can like it, comment it, do everything. And yes, so that brought some additional stuff. If you compare with 2007 and 10, they have their own blogs, community sites, and also personalization. So when I say personalization, so every user in the department or in a company, in an organization, they have their own. They can have their own my sites, like they have their own personal site. I mean, it's not exactly blog. Blog is something public-facing site, but my site is something private site, I would say. So it's like I would say comparatively with maybe the recent one. You go to Gmail and then it's integrated with your Google Drive. So it's very similar to that. So you have your My site where it's not for mails, but it has all those web parts, components that will show a lot of data, compared or relevant to you in the organization. And then it does have libraries where you can put the data, which is private to you. And internally within that it has blogs and all that. So it's kind of one gateway through which you go to or navigate to any of your sites, pages, or data in the SharePoint. So that's all community category. And content for sure. So content, again, it's pretty much the way the data is handled in SharePoint. So like I've been explaining, it's the document libraries, lists, and then the various types of data. So it's not just the documents, it's also the media type files that the SharePoint can handle. That has been enhanced in 2010. It wasn't much supported in 2007, but very much enhanced in 2010. Like, I mean, if I can just upload a video or an audio file in a document library just as a file, but SharePoint doesn't really give much capability or doesn't recognize the type of the file. So 2010 has different types of libraries, like image. I mean, images library has been always there, but there has been like, video and audio support. So it gives some kind of metadata, how much length of this video is, how much size it is, and what kind of resolution and all that. So it picks up the metadata based on the file.
Mm-hmm.
And so the content, how the content has been managed in SharePoint so far is through the content types. And SharePoint 2010 has brought a good feature like Enterprise Content Type Hub. So it's like, you can define the type of the data that will go into the SharePoint. So that type of data is centralized. So you have some 1,000 sites. You don't have to define the type of this content, which is called content type, everywhere in every site, but you can have it in one server and published or consumed by all other sites. So that's the content category. How SharePoint is handling it. And coming now is the search, the big thing. So now SharePoint has given a lot of capabilities to intake the data, for a data intake. And there's now tons of data, like 100 GB, not 100 GB, but 10 GB for each site, and then you have some 1,000 sites. So it's going to be a pretty huge data server piled up there in SharePoint now. The question comes as, how do I find my data now on top of all this data piled up? So that's when the search capability comes into the picture. So now this is also pretty much centralized. So you can find the data, whatever is going into any of your 1,000 sites. You can just use your search box, search it, and you will see it in the results. So how it has given the filters, it's about the findability of the content on the SharePoint server. So that's the refinement panel. It's pretty much similar to the Google search with refinement panel. Filter options. Yeah. So that's about the search and insights. So any organization, when they are like enterprise organizations, they really want to know statistics, like how my server is being used, how the users are coming into my site, and various analytics, various usage reports. They want to know. That's again, SharePoint provides capabilities like Excel services or web analytics. Is pretty much similar to Google Analytics, and then Power Pivot reports and all that. And yeah, you can integrate all those SSRS with SharePoint to get the reports based on it. And composites. So now we've been talking about a lot of functionalities right in the product, for which you don't need to write any code. It's just a configuration or a setup. So there will be some requirements where you wouldn't need to. There could be some complex requirements for which you wouldn't even need to write the code. If you think of all the features that I talked about, for example, let's take the BCS. So that's again a feature in SharePoint 2010, which wasn't there in pretty old versions. So my requirement is to connect the 2010, my SharePoint server with my legacy systems. So now that I bought my SharePoint product, so I don't want users going back to my legacy systems, because I want to centralize my system completely in the organization. So I want users to access those legacy systems within the SharePoint itself. So I can just deprecate my old versions, old systems. So how do we now integrate our legacy system with SharePoint? That's when the BCS comes into the picture. It's not. It's a feature, but it's not a It's not a one-click away feature. You have to do a lot of configuration to actually connect to your SQL and pull the data, and you can define what data needs to be pulled, what operations you can do it, and finally the data will be presented in SharePoint look and feel with all the metadata and content type concepts used.
Mm-hmm.
So composites is something, the feature talks about the complexity, and the feature also talks about it's not something that admin or maybe an end user or maybe a site collection administrator can do it, but definitely it's a little complicated configuration which a developer or a professional can only do it. But
Okay.
still doesn't require any code for this.
Okay.
Like
So,
if you take workflows, so
Mhm.
workflow is a feature that you have it in .NET, but you need to write a lot of code. So in SharePoint it's already in there, but you have to do a lot of configuration for it to make it work.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No worries. I was just wondering, like, see, as you said, like initially with sites you have lots of templates. I guess for these things also you must be having some wizards templates which does an initial task and then you can configure a bit later. Because I'm sure like when it has for the rest of the things, even this composers also must be having some wizards or templates, I guess.
Yeah, so like I mean it's a wizard for sure. So the business connectivity service or the workflows, they do have their wizards, of course, but it's not a simple 3-4 steps. That's what I'm saying. So you need a lot of configuration, and you have to know a lot of values to configure that particular service or feature.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about, if you compare the site creation and this particular business connectivity service,
Uh-huh.
so site creation is just you provide the values which you already know, like the site name, what should be the name of it, and what will be the URL for it. That's it. And
Okay.
you choose the template that you want. Just 3 fields you enter, and then the site is there. But for business connectivity service you want to set up, you have to know the SQL database name, and you have to make sure that your SharePoint server have enough rights on that particular server or database, and then you have to you have this SQL connector or whatever the exact connector. If you're connecting to a different database which is not SQL, maybe something else, you have to have that particular compatible connector to connect to that database from SharePoint. And then you have to make sure that there are enough rights to run this particular service on SharePoint. And then you have to know the user account and make sure that particular user account that is running this service has access to that particular server. So there are a lot of stuff like that. And it's not just over, because you have to again pull the data and make sure that particular tables or the columns match here. You have to configure that again here. Yeah, and then this service was there in 2007, named with the name BDC, Business Data Catalog.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was pretty much for read access. You can't do anything. You can just read the data. That's it. But here you can do a lot more than that. You can do all those code operations. In 2010, you don't have to write the code. But in 2007, every project trying to use the BDC, they write a lot of code. Yeah, which is pretty much eliminated here.
Okay. So what about like if the legacy system is not a .NET based system, like say a PHP application or something, can I still go ahead and do configuration with those sites?
Okay, so there are definitely some kind of limitations with SharePoint, how it can be integrated with all the legacy systems. So if we are talking about the database, you can always connect with the database like if it's compatible. If it's not, you have to write your own connector so that it can connect to that particular database. And I believe there are some third party who do sell the .NET connectors for those legacy database or systems. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, so that's about all this that I explained already. So that's all the circle. Yeah. And as you see that, SharePoint tried to change the, or I would say try to standardize the look and feel by introducing the ribbon. If you observe the Office Progress, you would see this ribbon type of interface. So they try to make the, mimic the same thing everywhere in SharePoint as well. Yeah, so it's pretty much explained. Just I gave the screen, so this is how my site looked like, with all this organization chart and the activities that they have been doing. So you can even go to their My Profile and see what they are in the organization and how they're related and their information, their activities, all that. When I say activities through SharePoint. Of course, you don't have a camera on them to actively.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So by the way, we like to for us, the user to have their own My Site, and there must be lots of permission issues which has to be handled through SharePoint, right?
Okay, so the biggest thing when you come from .NET to SharePoint, the biggest thing is that you will not touch your database. You don't do anything in database. You will forget what database is. Yeah, seriously.
Okay.
Because even when you write the code, you will never write a connection. You will never say SQL command.
Okay.
It's always played with the SharePoint object. So like in .NET, you have a lot of .NET framework. So it has API. It got a lot of controls, components. So similarly, SharePoint has its own framework, and then it has its own object. So each object itself handles internally with the database. You will not write any database code.
Okay. So it allows you to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It allows you to change your UI at least, right?
Of course it does. I mean, okay, so now I've been telling you what SharePoint has already given. Then why do we actually have SharePoint projects with a lot of development in it? Because every client has their own requirements and they want to change the look and feel of it, or maybe something is not already in SharePoint, but not the way they want it, but it's already in there. So yes, that is when SharePoint projects get created and planned, and then we write the code like this in Visual Studio to change the UI. SharePoint does have limitations, like it cannot bring the content aggregator. It has its own site structure, so content structure. So you cannot bring the content together the way the client needs it. So then we write a lot of web parts, a lot of code within it. So to bring all the data together with the metadata that is actually needed, instead of bringing all the metadata. And the presentation again changes where the UI changes, and you want some fancy look with Ajax kind of a...
Yeah, that's what I was coming to.
Right. I mean, you can do all of that. Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about it allows you to access the metadata. So that's why metadata is you're accessing something which has to do with SQL or connection. How does it expose the metadata?
Okay, so what it does is metadata is always handled. It's like a column here, even in SharePoint. We call it as a column here. Or columns are again different types, which we'll talk in further sessions. But yeah, so how does it handle? So when we use that wizard to connect with the external systems, it pulls the data, it reads all the data that we map it with the wizard, and it creates all those objects,
Okay.
SharePoint objects, which is actually pretty much same in the SQL. So like I said, list with columns in SharePoint is pretty much similar with a table with columns in the database. But the object types are different. That's it. The look and feel is different. That's it. So when you just use this wizard and configure it, it creates all those SharePoint objects pretty similar to those SQL objects. That's it. And it tries to sync the data.
So that's like, I have a couple of questions before we complete.
Sure, go ahead.
So as you said, like you don't touch the SQL Server at all. Then what's the task of administrators? Like they just configure it, or?
Okay, so when you come to administration, yes. So the configuration. So when we set up or install any SharePoint server, it does need a database server. Where will it store the things? It need to have a SQL server. So they will set up the SQL server, and we actually, administrators run the PowerShell script. They don't go to SQL Server or manually create the database. They don't do that. So they scripts so that the PowerShell scripts will actually create all those content database, config database, whatever, in the SQL Server. And all those permissions need to be set up again in SQL. It's not just that you set up the permissions in SharePoint, it's all good. No, it's not. Have to set up all those permissions in SQL as well and create all those databases and performance tuning if it's really necessary, which is actually not needed in SharePoint, which is pretty much rare because you always do the tuning from the SharePoint perspective, which will definitely tune the backend because the data is going from your SharePoint. So you tune here, it's tuned there.
Right.
Yeah, so when you go to SharePoint administration, it's not much of the SQL administration that they do, but SharePoint. How SharePoint integrates with SQL. If we talk about different products, SharePoint administration includes doing the things within SharePoint and doing the things with the products that are integrated with SharePoint, like SQL, AD, or maybe LDAP, or some other third-party products that are integrated with SharePoint. Yeah, all of that comes in picture.
Okay, so they are just enhance the features of lots of products. Like, see, I can imagine when you explain this, I can imagine my old Access days of development wherein, it's just this enhancement of all these features, document management, and database development. Like, though you are not doing straight away, it has options to do it at the front end and.
Yeah. So if you're talking about how the SharePoint products are, we do a lot of stuff there. So it's not just like an enhancement. We do build things from scratch, like .NET. You have a .NET control, but you cannot see it. You have, what you see is only the .NET API. But in SharePoint, you do see the default controls, right? So in SharePoint, you do see the default given controls by Microsoft. But if the client wants something different which is not already in SharePoint, so then we will build it from scratch, or we may build it, or we may actually enhance that default one. So it's all again technical strategy.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. So, any more questions before we close for today?
Yeah, generally not about the training. I just wanted to ask, like, what would be the actual job profile of a SharePoint consultant? If you had to,
I think you broke. Can you repeat that?
What would be the actual job profile of a SharePoint consultant? What are you to do?
Oh, well, you're talking about consultant, or you're talking about developer? Consultant.
Yeah, I'm a consultant. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
SharePoint consultant is, it depends from their geography, location to location and how they deal with. They they still tag SharePoint consultant, but you might be doing a developer. It all depends again on the client requirement. But in general, when anyone say consultant, they are actually doing development. They are also a strategic guy from a SharePoint background. So they will be given, it's like much handled than just a developer, just being a developer.
Okay.
So if I say you just trained and then you want to be consultant, I would say it's very difficult. But if I just got trained and then maybe 1 year I just been doing development. So when I'm doing development, someone will actually help me on the bigger strategies, how a component can be developed. So I was given a requirement. Then what happens is, I don't know how to do it. I don't know which part of SharePoint object should I use it. There could be multiple ways to do it, but I don't know the best one unless you already did implement all of the best approaches.
Okay.
So yeah.
It just comes through practice, I guess. But then I mean, after a training, you can become a administrator or a developer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so if you are a developer, you pretty much know the configuration, so you can even change it to administrator, but you have to know a little bit more within how you can configure it. But you can always play with it. Once you have the SharePoint server, you just go within it and just keep clicking every link. That's it. SharePoint. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I mean, if you are an administrator already, and if you want the development, it's very difficult because you don't have the programming background, and it's the API, and it's a little different to be a developer from an administrative background. Yeah. But you can always go vice versa.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so very much. This is what I had for initial class.
No problem.
Questions.
You're welcome.
But then I'm sure it won't be difficult being a .NET guy to grasp the concepts of SharePoint, I guess.
Not at all. Not at all.
Cool. That's good.
I mean, I'm very much happy because when I've been training a lot of guys there, so people do come with no programming background, so I have to even teach 1 or 2 classes with Whoops concepts. Otherwise, it'll be difficult for them to pick it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty much makes easy for me, so we can go in detail when we get into the sessions. Yeah.
Oh, cool. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, Vinod.